get rolling here. So we've passed out the PDHs for you. There's 7 PDHs. Just kind of use them if you need them. Sign up for your files. And we'll get rolling here in the afternoon. So we've got one longer module to go, scoping, project scoping and design requirements. We'll probably take a little quick 5-minute break in here just to stand up, but won't go anywhere because we do need to work through this. Yes, we'll get into our project scoping and design requirements. And we'll start off with the scoping overview, talk about general scoping requirements, and those are from the federal level. And we'll see how MnDOT has been applying them, our scoping process, talk about our standards, and we'll wrap up with 4 example projects where we've did some challenging type things. So we'll get into the first portion is based off the federal criteria. Which of the following project types require the provisions of accessible curb ramps per the Americans with Disabilities Act? So the first one, new construction, curb ramps? Yep. Reconstruction? Yep. Preservation or alteration projects? Yep, okay. Next one's a little bit of a trick question. Preventive maintenance projects. Do they require curb ramps? See some people nodding yes, and it's kind of a trick question. It depends. I mean, the feds have different classification of projects than some of us may have historically had, but we'll take a look at what those are. And so it is the top 3. And and before I get into just that federal requirement, kind of throw in this little tidbit from our tech memo about what triggers the alteration threshold. It is preservation projects. But for example, MnDOT does have facilities in our right-of-way, usually LUPs, limited use permits. Quite often they could be trails within MnDOT right-of-way, for example. And the ADA really doesn't care who owns the facility. They're just saying if you're doing this preservation type project that the curb ramps get upgraded. So who's ever doing the overlay, be it MnDOT or the local community, whoever triggers that threshold doing the mill and overlay in front of the curb ramps needs to do that upgrade. They're not really caring who pays for it or how it gets paid for, just that the work is completed. So at LUPs, for example, it gets a little bit gray because they, quite often when MnDOT's doing our overlay, we'll go in front of the trails that are locally owned. But we have, for the most case, it could be done either way. We could ask for cost participation on those for the work to happen, or we can fund it ourselves. It's been done both ways. We generally do fund them more often, likely. But again, ADA doesn't really care who pays for it, just the fact that it gets done. One thing about LUPs, though, there's definitely that threshold for the upgrade the curb ramps. But on the trails, let's say, the trails also need to meet standards. And we'll upgrade these on our mill and overlay projects, but we are currently not upgrading a lot of trails, but we are evaluating them. We're starting to evaluate them because all of the ADA standards that apply to sidewalks and curb ramps apply to trails. So you need to have it in good condition, nothing more than that half-inch bump if it's beveled or a 1/4 inch for vertical discontinuity, but also cross slope, that applies. Running slope applies as well too. So there's a lot of trails out there that are in disrepair, poor cross slopes that are just kind of there, sitting there. And what we're starting to do is ask the question on our project, we're out there with a mill and overlay. Well, this would be a good time, city. Here's the deficiencies, or county. Here's the deficiencies. Would you like to repair them with our project? And if, hopefully the answer is yes, that's a great time to do it. If the answer is no, the next question is, okay, when will that facility get upgraded? Because it does need to meet standards. So is something on your timeline that's more reasonable? So that expectation is out there that the facilities are accessible. And at some point, I mean, the answer could be the facility gets removed if it's crumbling and in disrepair. So again, it gets into this kind of whole, where does this discussion go? So something to think about that might have been out of sight, out of mind in some people's eyes. So getting back to the federal definition of preventive maintenance projects, they generally do not require accessibility improvements based on the federal definition of preventive maintenance. But they also do say the combination of 2 or more maintenance treatments may rise to the level of being an alteration, thereby requiring the inclusion of accessible features. So they're saying, well, if you do 2 or 3 preventive maintenance things, it might equal a preservation or alteration type project. So looking at their definitions, what they call maintenance are chip seals, crack filling and sealing, diamond grinding, dowel bar retrofits, fog seals, joint crack seals, joint repairs, pavement patching, scrub sealing, slurry seals, spot high friction treatments, and surface sealing. All of those things do not require curb ramp upgrades. The lower ones are what does, what they call alterations. Any additional layer of new asphalt, that's kind of a case, that's went to settlement and court hearings, so that's pretty clear. Anytime you're doing a mill and overlay, you have to upgrade your curb ramps. Also, cape seals, hot in place recycling, this one, microsurfacing and thin lift overlays. That's a tough one. MnDOT has generally considered those to be preventive maintenance type projects from our standpoint, so we haven't been doing a lot of curb ramp upgrades. So we've since started, and again, no one really asked me on this. If I would have had my vote, I'd say that is not a great project to upgrade curb ramps. It's a small scope, and MnDOT traditionally delivers them very quickly on a quick timeline. Sometimes they don't allow us, oftentimes they don't allow us to get right away, so we're limited there. So we get very limited type fixes. But again, they didn't ask me. This is a federal requirement for these types of projects that you do the upgrades. Also, mill and fills, mill and overlays. That's pretty clear. That's been out there for a while. New construction, open graded surface course, and rehabilitation and reconstruction, including concrete pavement repairs. So, whenever you're doing those things on the bottom, you've tripped the threshold. You are required to do curb ramps, upgrades. And MnDOT has been doing this pretty religiously, obviously, since we first started. Maybe the microsurface is something a little new to us. But there are many entities who it appears aren't. And you don't have to be an expert, an ADA engineer to see that you've got a brand new road and a raggedy old curb ramp. Many users can see that. And they understand the requirements, many users, and they say, why isn't X and X entity upgrading curb ramps? I would say do that at your own risk, because you're not going to have much of a case if you get called on it, because it's required since 2015, since earlier, but they've reiterated in 2015, technical assistance, joint technical assistance from the Department of Justice and the FHWA, that these types of projects require curb ramps. Kind of my thought is that they need to put these thresholds out because we're always waiting for the bigger project. We say, well, we don't really want to do curb ramps now, we'll do it later. Well, I think they're getting tired of us kicking the can. Because again, our transition plan, again, in 1992 was supposed to be done in the next 10 to 15 years, so early 2000s. We're always waiting for the better time. But sometimes, when we're out here just doing our project that's going to last 10, 15 years, that's the time. So that's my interpretation on that, of the federal requirements. Yes?
What's the thinking behind open graded surface course, though? Why that? Those are usually rural.
In case there are pedestrian facilities out there, and different agencies use these in different applications. They may be using them in a suburban type area. I think they're going more for just the length of fix. This is, again, my editorial. It's like you've got a substantial fix out here. It's like the time is due to fix the curb ramps at a minimum. But I'm not sure of the exact reasoning. So MnDOT also has thresholds from bridge projects, and this is derived from federal guidance as well. So preventive maintenance on a bridge project that wouldn't require curb ramp upgrades are bridge substructure activities, also superstructure activities such as painting, bearing rehabs, and barrier guardrail railing restorations would not require curb ramp upgrades. But there are alterations for bridges that do. So bridge deck overlays. And And this has been a contentious one. I started doing this, working with the bridge office about 4 years ago now. And you know, before MnDOT was always saying, well, yeah, I know you got to do curb ramps on the road because that's what you do. But bridges are different. You know, the bridge office designs those, and you don't do curb ramps on bridges because that's just different. And so, but I'm kind of thinking to myself, you know, a couple of ways. As a user, you know, if I'm wheeling down a road and I can't get over a curb ramp, do I care if it's on a bridge or a road? Same deal, it's still a barrier. And even more so from an engineering standpoint, if we're not fixing our curb ramps on bridges on like repair projects, what are we waiting for the bridge to get reconstructed? So that's like many years down the road. So that it seemed to be off on 2 levels. But even as I was preparing this training with the TAP for this, they kind of said MnDOT went too far for that. So just as all honesty in the slide, we did ask our chief counsel's office, and they said yes, ADA does not make a distinction between roadways and bridges. They just say mill and overlays on roadways require upgrades. So that is a legal opinion. It's just, you know, you can all make your own. And I'm not a lawyer, but we're feeling it meets the threshold. This is one where MnDOT did go a little higher than the minimums. Bridge expansion joint replacement if potentially impacting the adjacent curb ramp. So what we're saying there is if you've got an expansion joint that you're replacing through a sidewalk, and your curb ramp is, you know, within like 25 or so feet, and if you were to build that curb ramp, if that expansion joint was a limiting factor, that you should, before you replace this expansion joint for like $100,000, you should make sure you're putting it there at the right elevation so your curb ramp works, and you just fix the expansion joint once. You don't go and fix it and then later do a curb ramp and rip back into that $100,000 expansion joint. Do it all at one time. So we're talking about making the scopes of your projects align up so you don't have to do rework. So that is one where we did go above the minimums. But also we're saying do the same sidewalk repairs if you're doing the bridge deck repairs. So you got a pothole on your bridge deck, you got a pothole in your sidewalk, you fix them both. The vertical discontinuity, same thing, you're all mobilized. Do the same work, treat the two the same, because again, you are mobilized. So that was a ton of talk about curb ramps. And here's a picture of what we've been doing for at least the first 5 years I was here. You know, that's what ADA meant, curb ramps. You know, yeah, I'm doing ADA, you know, sidewalks? No, I'm doing curb ramps. That's ADA, just curb ramps. That's all you have to do, right? So we did a lot of that. This is a project a few years ago. Again, nice one-way directional ramp, everything Tim was talking about. Domes full width within 3 inches, directional curb, nice smooth patch. You know, good. You know, we're coming in here doing our mill and overlay. Check the box, curb ramp's done. I can leave this town. I'm going to come back 15, 20 years later when the road needs it again, right? Because that's all I have to do is curb ramps, right? So start looking at this sidewalk, you know, from a user standpoint. It's pretty currently looking stuff just beyond that curb ramp. And do you think, what does a user think? You know, if they can get up the 2 curb ramps, but they can't get in between on the sidewalk, do they really care? Or do they even understand that, oh, well, all you have to do is curb ramps and no one cares if you do sidewalk? Not really. I mean, ADA is about providing accessibility, and sidewalks are part of that. So I'd also have a challenging time talking to project managers. Again, we're all mobilized, and I can just see that sidewalk. You know, give me 30 feet of extra concrete here, just 4-inch walk. Make this a lot easier, you know, make a huge improvement. Our project manager would say, oh, no, I can see what you're saying, Todd, but nope, that's not part of the scope. We don't have the money, and it's just not our policy to do sidewalks. So that's where we were for the first 5 years. Got to be pretty frustrating, actually. And I would also say a little short-sighted, again, because what does a user understand that? If accessibility is our goal, I would say no. So anyways, our engineers would always say, you know, we'll get the sidewalks, you know, we want to wait for the right project. You know, and a recon is the perfect time to do it. So we'll just do our curb ramps now, we'll fix our sidewalks on our recons. MnDOT has about 600 miles of sidewalk. Does anyone know how long it would have taken us to get to our sidewalk if we were waited for urban reconstructs? Anyone? 30? 50? Heard older, 150? Not quite there, but you're close. About 100 years. Yeah. So, is that reasonable? You know, I talked about that pole earlier in that first slide where I said the pole's in the middle and we'll move that out of the sidewalk. We'll move it, you know, after the kid graduates from high school, 15 years later. Didn't really do much good for that kid, that student, getting to school. But we're talking 100 years. I mean, that's grandkids of grandkids. I mean, how can you justify that? We have a transition plan. All of you are supposed to have a transition plan. And we're supposed to be showing progress on that transition plan. So if someone calls us on that and we say, yeah, we're doing progress, we'll get there in 100 years. That's not a good defense at all. So, yeah, so management asked a few people what the opinion is, and they said, well, what do you think it would be, Todd? And I said, well, maybe 30, 35, because we'd be doing like a lot more work than we are, and they'd be getting a lot more benefit or whatever. They still said, no, that doesn't seem reasonable to us. 20 years, MnDOT is going to substantially complete our transition plan. So that is what we're doing. And actually, it matches up with our paving cycle really well. We're already out there every 15, 20 years doing curb ramps, or doing overlays, which trigger curb ramps. And now since we're there, pound it out. Do the sidewalks, driveways, crosswalks. We're not quite on trails yet because we don't own a lot of those, but they're on our transition plan, and there should be on yours too if your LUP is in our right-of-way. APS, other push-button actuated flashers, pedestrian bridges, railroad crossings through sidewalks. They're all in our transition plan. So we're out showing progress. We want to get those done in 20 years. So yeah, big heavy lift for that. But yeah, it's gonna, we started that in 2017, and that's where I'm kind of peeling off $10 million a year of my funding to add to projects, to scope enhance these, to do the driveway, sidewalks, et cetera, everything we talked about. So we've made a pretty good commitment on that. And so not saying that anyone has to do what MnDOT's doing, obviously, but just have that conversation among your agency and find out what is reasonable. You know, when someone does ask you on the progress of your transition plan, what kind of answer do you have? So again, hopefully you're at least doing the curb ramps with your mill and overlays and preservation projects, but there's other things too. So we'll kind of look at some of these and see there's reasons why we're doing this besides just the requirements, but also how we build facilities really matter. We don't want to miss opportunities. Yeah, we can definitely talk about, yes, I'm looking for the microphone, Tim, to talk about how MnDOT is paying for our ADA facilities on our right-of-way. So, did you want me to just describe it?
Yeah, just to clarify for the local agencies, because they have projects that come up to the trunk highway, and there may be some misconceptions from what you had said earlier in the day.
Sure, well, I'll try to be as clear, but every situation has specifics. But basically, who's ever doing the mill and overlay basically pays for the curb ramps as far as MnDOT. So if it's on our right-of-way, that's generally what we're overlaying. So we are going to do the curb ramps at those quadrants. And generally, sometimes we'll even carry it to the other side of the intersection if it makes sense, but not always. But basically, you really want to go by where the thresholds are. So where you're paving in front of is what you have to do for the curb ramp upgrades. We're doing the sidewalks, obviously paralleling our right-of-way and within our right-of-way. We're not generally going beyond our right-of-way to do sidewalk improvements. That would obviously be a local responsibility. Hasn't been a lot of, there could be cost sharing. I'm not saying there can't. There just traditionally hasn't been a lot of cost sharing for work that gets added on to projects, especially because the local projects kind of come to us late and we don't have money to add to their projects often when it comes to ADA upgrades. But it's basically where your limits lie. You also want to be cautious, though. The ADA law does say that you can't necessarily construe your projects to eliminate doing ADA or to minimize, to avoid ADA. So, you know, that can stick out like a sore thumb, too. Like you mill and lay your whole road and you skip every intersection because you don't want to do ADA. You know, so you can try to outsmart this, but I mean, there is some logical applications to this and how you have project limits approaching our right-of-way. And, you know, for a specific example, if you are going through the radius, you should be upgrading our curb ramps if it's a local project, wherever your termini ends. Is that covering
MinDOT's definition of their right of way, and then MinDOT's definition of who should pay for something, you know.
Sure.
So,
And-
and that gets confusing
Yep.
and frustrating to a lot of people.
So ADA follows the project limits and the paving limits. So that's the true threshold for ADA. You start getting together with everything else, you know, like where should this project end or who should do what. You know, it just comes down to like engineering judgment and partnership and just collaborating to find the best project results. So a lot of that's specific, but as long as everyone knows that if you're there, you need to do the accessibility and you're doing it the best you can. That's about as clear as I can get.
Yeah, I just thought it was a good tool. Just go back.
Sure.
Kind of warms up there.
Yep, okay. And we'll talk about some of the coordination that we've done and then some of the lack of coordination that we've done, and maybe hopefully that'll give more light to that question. Oh, missed that. So we're talking if minimum requirements drive your project scope, you'll end up in this short-term perpetual loop of short-term fixes. So we're talking about considering the value and expanding a project scope to provide that long-term type fix, and that's we're talking sidewalks, driveways, trails, crosswalks, and whatnot. So we're also looking at seeing what our following two major goals are. A, it's providing a system of accessible infrastructure, and B, it's limiting liability from injuries and tort claim. So the whole, injuries and discrimination, I'm sorry. So discrimination is the whole thing that we've been talking about. Accessibility, ADA, civil rights. That's the discrimination part. There's also injuries, which is tort claims. So, just having trip hazards isn't good for anybody. Anyone can fall, slip, have an injury. So you want to avoid that too. So there's two legal reasons besides all the other things we've talked about, but why you'd want to be doing this. And both goals can be achieved by looking for improvement opportunities within the roadway projects. So we're identifying those in the scoping phase, looking for the right value in those, and making sure we think it's going to pay off in the long term. So we'll talk about what MnDOT has been doing. Again, we're following the federal requirements on curb ramp upgrades. So here's what a project might look like. We're upgrading the quadrant. Probably the MnDOT right-of-way is right here, so we're updating that. We're chasing the curb ramp limits off to its tie-in. We're a little off right-of-way there, but to the logical termini. And again, here's what our sidewalk fixes may look like. It's partial fixes, and because we have thresholds, we're leaving some, removing some other areas, taking another patch, whatever it is. So our thresholds are based on condition. So poor or failing sidewalks, that's where those trip hazards are, those busted panels, things like that, faulted joints. So that would be one trigger. The other trigger is we're saying that the cross slope, there's a trigger, and we're saying actually 3% is our threshold. We know everything we build has to be less than 2, but we're not going to go out here and fix absolutely everything because we are financially constrained as well, and we want to get the worst first kind of thing. But also it's hard to explain to a citizen why they have this really good shape 2.5% cross slope sidewalk. It's hard to explain why you're ripping that out and putting it back very similar. So we're doing that targeted type approach, not fixing everything, but again, getting the worst. And so we've got 20 years of that, and actually 20 years of really hard work because we're going to be resetting all of that geometry that we talked about, some curb lines here and there, some right-of-way where we need it, removing barriers where we need it, and again, getting that whole 20-year thing done. And actually, ADA will get a lot easier after that. So we got 20 years ahead of us at the DOT. And then it gets back into more standard routine stuff. It's just replacing panels as they're busted. And even that 2.5% panel we left 20 years ago will probably be getting kind of busted up, and maybe it'll be replaced on condition. So that's why we're saying it's substantially complete, because again, we're not doing absolutely everything, but also we understand that it's a living document, and your transition plan is never complete. So your system's always changing, and you're always improving it and whatnot. So that'd be the same thing with the transition plan. Any questions on any of that? Okay. So when site conditions restrict construction or alteration of the facility to PROAG minimums, at MnDOT, we make sure that PM, the design engineer, and the ADA unit must concur in providing the accommodation to the maximum extent feasible. And so yeah, we're making sure we use the right tricks. We're looking at certain options and make sure we're not missing things and getting a good product. Sometimes it's a good, better, best, but yeah, a better product as we can within what seems reasonable. Also like to point out this, documentation of all facilities needs to happen not meeting requirements. And that's not a MnDOT thing, that's an ADA thing. You need to look at alternatives and especially if something is going to meet standards. You can't say, it's not going to work. I tried one thing, that's all it is. No, they expect you to look at alternatives, check the pros and cons, see what you can work in, and then document. Hopefully you're taking the better solution, but document your decisions you made. At least you'll have a reason when someone calls you on it. But that is an ADA requirement to look at alternatives. We're just having that group discussion to make sure we're getting the best type of fit for the situation. So again, we have a 20-year life cycle for our pedestrian facilities. That's what we're talking about, that scope. Getting the footprints, move the barriers out of the way, set your curb lines differently. We're also making sure we design them to be constructable with tolerances, maintainable for maintenance access routes, snow storage, minimizing V-curb is one thing. Again, usable for the range of users. So not just always the minimums, make sure you're seeing what the needs are and designing to them, the pedestrian needs. So these are the handouts that Tim mentioned earlier. And these are the MnDOT standards, the yellow column in the middle. The mins and maxes are more of the federal type standards. Again, the blue is ProAg, green is MnDOT, orange is MUTCD. So just like Tim was talking about, again, we've got these ramp slopes or cross slopes. So again, you can be 2% max cross slope, designed to 1.5 for tolerance. Again, you can be totally flat in the ADA world, except even in a building, they say 0% is good. It's not good for a highway though, so we get that 1.5% minimum. So that's kind of our range for a lot of that. And Tim talked about ramps lengths on there, that 4 to 6 being important. Yeah, so Tim covered a lot of this as far as our starting slopes and our sidewalk widths. So again, this is pretty heavily in blue because there's a lot of ProAg requirements, mins and max. ProAg has a lot to say about curb ramps. So we'll go on to the next one. This is the APS criteria. Again, there's not a lot of ProAg in here that kind of deferred it to the MUT. So the orange is MUT, and you can see that's a lot of the criteria that we talked about earlier. And there's those 2 green MnDOT ones, and that's the maintenance access route and the centered on the landing. So again, want to be fully honest of where these requirements come from, because I know that is out there, I hear it, and MnDOT ADA is like gold plating the world, building the Cadillac. So, and I mean, a lot of the times, we're going for obviously good designs that work, but I still think there's a lot of times people, when they say that, they actually don't even know what all the requirements are. Because even like perpendicular grade breaks, I don't think people even know that's a ProAg requirement. It is. That's not a MnDOT thing. So we want to be fully transparent where these requirements come from, and we're going beyond those. And also we give the reason why we're going beyond those to say, okay, that makes sense to me in this situation, maybe it may not make sense in a third situation. So weigh that and see what you think makes the most sense. Again, we have our reasons as maintainability, constructability, and usability, and also further guidance off to the right on all these. These are actually on our website, and they are part of our new tech memo. And if you are doing work on MnDOT right away, and if you're consultants working on MnDOT projects, all of these requirements would apply. Again, for your local agencies, we recommend them. So we get into sidewalk design criteria, and there's less blue on here, so there's less ProAg. They care about the slopes and the width a little bit. But there's all these other green numbers over here that ProAg doesn't really care about. For example, we've got a boulevard width, boulevard slopes. ProAg doesn't care about any of that, to be honest. It's not a compliance feature at all. But some of those things that Tim was talking about, like boulevard slope. Does anyone know a paved boulevard slope? What MnDOT's, the road design criteria is for the maximum boulevard slope? Anybody? 1 to 3. 33%. So again, you start putting that in some of your downtown corridors with your door swings and everything, doesn't make any sense, obviously. So don't do that. So we have incorporated other standards that are just good for all these reasons we've talked about, pedestrian needs, safety needs, whatever, just how to design a good sidewalk. So we're encompassing into that because there has been a lack of that information that we feel in the engineering world, or at least in MnDOT's world. So we added some criteria there. For those types of criteria, those types of fields. Now we get into driveway design, and there's even less blue ProAg. Again, cross slope, running slope, width, that's all they care about. They don't care about aprons, they don't care about tie-ins, they don't care how cars use this driveway. But we're engineers, you got to make sure it works for multiple functions. So we added in more of that green type of MnDOT driveway type criteria. And yeah, so this is where we start talking about crosswalks. And that has been kind of overlooked up until now, I think, for a lot part. We'd do this on recons, but not overlays. But this right side of the table is PROAG requirements. This middle part is MnDOT road design criteria. So I'll go over to PROAG here, and they'll talk about the running slope. You can see is always 5%. So that's the crosswalk running slope as you're going up and over a crown. So it's your crown, your roadway cross slope. So that's a 5% maximum, just like it is for a sidewalk. That's what your crosswalk can be. So anytime your shoulder slopes or your highway slopes are over 5%, that doesn't meet standards. So we're looking at that. They also talk about cross slope being very important. So we'll go into a few cases here. PROAG talks about the first condition where it's a crosswalk with a yield or a stop sign, 2% cross slope. You know, that makes sense. The whole crosswalk can be at 2%. Vehicles are stopping. It doesn't matter. It can flatten out or not flatten out. They're all going slow. So just table the whole thing so the pedestrian going through the crosswalk can have that 2% cross slope. So it's just like sidewalk criteria through your crosswalk. There's a second situation where PROAG's kind of funny about this, I think, but they call this condition crosswalk without a yield or stop sign. So you kind of got to ask yourself, well, what is that? So I've kind of, those are how I view it. So they're either talking about uncontrolled intersections, which probably a lot of you guys have, or signalized intersections, which we both have, MnDOT and locals. So this is that type of criteria, or that type of setting. But they do have a point over here where they talk about 5% cross slope allowed. So that's, again, that was surprising to a lot of people. And how I'm kind of rationalizing that or explaining that is to say, kind of that case we talked about before. You know, if your roadway's coming down and it's a through lane, or no stop control, come down at 5%, you don't want to put in this 2% table because you'll be doing that Dukes of Hazzard type thing. And so the PROAG is saying you don't have to do that. But MnDOT starts talking about, oh, we're 1.5% or maximum extent feasible. So what we're saying is, if you're coming down that same road and you're coming across a side street that comes through and it's already crowned and tabled, so you're already coming down and you're already going up and through this intersection, so there's already a large bump or whatever there. All we're saying is you should extend it through those crosswalks. So you give the pedestrians the same benefit of you're giving that car for that side street. So we're holding that 2% through the whole intersection, and we are going to table that out, the crosswalk, because the whole intersection is already tabled out. So we're saying 1.5% because it's tolerances, or still maximum extent feasible. You know, if you're climbing up a hill, you're never going to, it's going to be hard to fix that. So, yes. Then there's the third case where we start talking about mid-block crossings, and everyone's kind of in agreement there. You know, you don't want to just warp to fit grade. You don't want to create the bumps. But again, if you've got a shoulder, you can still table out the curb line a little bit, potentially. So we'll talk about how we're starting to apply that. And I should have mentioned something in the inside-out design part too. Like I said, where if you're designing these things to fit in with the lay of the land, if you're going by your outside tie-ins and you're having your roadway fit in with that lay of the land, you're much better off. Because for all those reasons like I talked about, pedestrian cross sidewalks and everything, but actually even from a roadway standpoint, if I've got a hill going downhill like this, and I want to go and put a cross slope in here of my sidewalk corridor, I'm falling like from a hill to a river and my road is paralleling it. If I go in here and put this crown section in, I'm fighting this lay of the land over here, and obviously I'm making the pedestrian facilities worse, but I'm also making all of my road tie-in facilities worse. So don't even fight it. Just have that road lay in there with the context or the contours of the land, and it's going to have you a better sidewalk design, and your side street tie-ins are going to be better. So again, we want to fight this typical section and put it in some places where it just does not belong. So again, it'll help your road design. And that's actually what we're talking about here on crosswalks, because we have, again, here we've got a road design. This is in St. Paul. It's basically coming right down here, all the way down to the river at 5% or so. But this happens quite frequently. We have side streets coming in with a crown section, and we'll bring that crown all the way through. We'll stop it right at the curb line because you don't want that to impact cars, obviously, because that'd be a bad deal. But we'll bring that crown through the crosswalk. And so I'm asking, why are we doing that? You know, if we're already bringing this through at 5% for the road, why don't we do that same thing for the crosswalk? So we've got a project on here, a mill and overlay project. We're actually going in here and reconstructing that area in gray to take this out. Because anytime, you know, this whole slope is coming down at 5%, anytime you start going uphill the wrong way, you're compounding all that over here. Now I've just steepened all this to happen over here. So I don't meet standards with this 7%. And you know, I'm making the PEDs go down, up, wheeling up this. I get the fact that I'm going up a 5% hill, just don't mean we can go up and down this 5% hill many times. So follow that same grade through here. And actually, you know, we've got an upstream catch basin on this side. So I'm actually confident even going gutter out here. We've got a lot of our water caught here. We're going to reconstruct this. Gutter out, just let this ramp come down, gutter out, follow it all through. You know, we started doing this training in the Olympics when we were doing the ski jumping. So, you know, this little 5% gutter in is a perfect little ski jump for a wheelchair. You know, you can kind of come down here so you can mark it, see how far you go. So again, follow the profile. You know, if you're not going against it, it's always going to be improved. Again, so for pedestrians. So also with crosswalks, this is our interesting situation. This is a grade separated interchange, and we've got a freeway ramp over here. But this could be any downhill that we have, again with a side street, so it works in multiple locations. But quite often these types of things have a good slope to them. If it's a grade separated, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6% sometimes, up and over. So, and again, all you have to do with ADA is match that profile, so it should be easy, right? But how we design roads and how we analyze these things and design them can really add extra complications. Especially when we want to take a typical section for this side road and like have, for example, a 2% crown. So whenever I hold that 2% crown, which is going against the downward flow here, I'm lowering this point. So I'm making that much worse. So I'm losing grade right there. So that's where my curb ramp starts. I just put that curb ramp in a little bit of hole just because I want to maintain this typical section. This road should theoretically come in at the same cross slope right here. Or we hold our profile for our center line right through our crosswalks. Do all your crowning and supering after you get outside of the crosswalk. So that's one thing where these corners get hard because we want to fight grades with our typicals. Also, we do everything with centerline designs, right? That's all we do with centerline profiles. So we'll run this profile out here at this center line and at that center line, and we'll run typical sections with those two white arrows because that's all you do. And you kind of stop at the intersection and you just make sure those two center lines meet, and you're happy because the cars are good in the middle of the road. What that does on the outsides gets really compounded because, again, I've got maybe 80 foot of run when I do the center lines, but if I just do those same offsets, those same typicals, I'm losing that same grade over 30 feet as I lost between 80. So this area gets twice as steep as your road. You know, your road would work fine for cars because that's what we're designing them for. All this hosed up stuff happens at your radii. So that's the second thing that's hurting us in these types of areas. And ultimately, I'll show you the third in a sec. But this is what it looks like. You know, you definitely want to hold this at the same slope as your mainline profile. Again, when this starts diving down, this curb ramp starts off much lower, so you're even below gutter grade over here. And again, for those few things I talked about are getting you there. And then you got to fight up this hill. And actually, you're not only fighting up the hill that you put ourselves in, but you also have to make up that curb height of 6 or 8 inches. So that's the third factor that's working against me. You know, I'm fighting the typical section. I'm fighting the fact that we're doing this centerline design and not looking at our sidewalk profiles and crosswalks. And then I'm making up curb height. So we've got plenty of new bridges, brand new bridges, 80 to 100-year bridges. Our layouts all look good. We stamp them. Yep, meet ProAg in pre-design. Gets into detailed design. They start cranking out the curb ramp numbers. And they go, oh gosh, this isn't going to work. Well, we're at 60% plans now, so that's just what it is. I can't change my ramp alignment now or anything drastic like that. So we live with this, and we're totally missing it. 100-year bridges, just because we design it for our center lines and we're not thinking about how it affects the pedestrians. And again, we know these are tricky and get compounded. So there are some cases actually on Dale Avenue where we've got a 8% curve, which is, it's all we can do. But in that case, we're actually introducing a barrier between the bridge, traffic and the pedestrians, because we're not climbing up that 8-inch curb. So at least we're giving them, crossing at bridge deck elevation. So we're at least giving the peds that same 8% curve that we're giving the cars. So a lot to think about there, but I think it's important, in not just bridge applications, but again, steep type areas. Here's a crosswalk example of, we've got a very wide road here, existing, and actually we're going to build another lane, another right turn lane on this one. So we're coming in here with a new bridge project and a widening. So the design called for the whole thing to be 2% through the crosswalks, just like we wanted, like we recommended. And also the construction limits are in blue, so we moved pretty far on the north side, but we were short on the south side. There's that area in red that I'm going to point you to, which caused us problems. So again, we've got maybe 130 feet at 2% cross slope. And I promise you, if we needed 2 more lanes, it would have been 160 feet at 2%, because we will always do that for cars, because that's what needs to happen. So again, here was that added right turn lane. So it's a 2% cross slope, just like we wanted. The design called for that to be 2% over there, but construction said, that's too big a bump. We don't want to do that. They cranked it down to 5%, but also our removal limits were short. We left that 1.3% existing that was flat. If we'd have just pushed our construction limits 10, 15 feet further, could have swapped those 2 elevations or slopes, you'd had a 1.5 in front of your crosswalk and 5% going down. But we didn't. And again, here's the picture. All new concrete. We removed way more back here. That's the 1.3% we left. And this is how it's going to be. Concrete road, new bridge, we're done. And again, could have had that be a 2% cross slope. We didn't. And actually, we talk about the city, how actually they are probably going to come in here and raise this road because that apron is too steep for their driveway, and they're going to tie in. But they're not going to chase it back to our crosswalk. So absolutely everything will be built new around here, but kind of this blend area where our pedestrian facilities are, that's always the edge of our project. So it's like, whatever happens, we'll just figure it out. That's why our pedestrian facilities often stink, because we're the blend of all projects, and no one thinks like, oh, that's actually what we need to build as well. So start thinking about that with all of these aspects, construction limits and scope. So there are some differences between MnDOT and ProAg. Tim's mentioned a lot of them. They got the 4-foot min with the 5x5 passing areas. MnDOT has 5-foot minimum sidewalks. There is a difference in the flangeway gap. We didn't accept that just because industry wasn't sure it was safe. It's supposed to be a 2.5 inch versus a 3 inch at a railroad flange gap, so wheelchairs don't get caught in the tracks in the crossing. There's a setback that Tim talked about with the dome setback at rail, but also roundabouts and multi-lane free rights. MnDOT excluded that at the signalization requirements. ProAg does require that if you have a multi-lane roundabout or a multi-lane free right, that it is signalized. So we felt that that defeated the purpose of a roundabout, so we didn't accept it. Again, it is in the new pro language, and if that does get adopted, that could be that same light switch kind of thing that we'll have to deal with. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be signals, but something, RFBs, some kind of accessibility improvement may be required. But I felt I should even talk a little bit about single lane roundabouts even, just from a visually impaired user standpoint. So we talk about how they use sidewalk facilities. Quite often they start with just they've got the default path of travel. So you're traveling straight, that's a good start. And you want to continue straight, it'll generally get you where you want to go. You also use the adjacent cars, when you go when they go, when the cars are perpendicular, you stop when they go because they're crossing. Also, as you go across intersections, you generally want to keep, that similar type distance. So if they're 10, 15 feet away and they're getting closer to you, well, you would veer off to make sure you're getting to where you want to go. So there's a lot of cues at a intersection that visually impaired users will use. Even beyond just that's non-signalizing it, and then there's all the APS. But now you're into a roundabout type situation. So you were coming straight, Until, well, no, this is a roundabout, so I'm feeling around here, okay, this is sending me around, and it's pretty easy to lose where I'm supposed to be heading. But anyways, I'm going around the corner and finding my curb ramp, and then I'm here at the crosswalk. And again, I used to wait for those cars to stop and start, but they're not doing that anymore. They're just spinning out there, going around. So some of them are turning at 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270, whatever. And so you're just relying on the fact that, okay, I found my curb ramp, and I've got my cane or my guide dog, and I know the rule is they're supposed to yield to pedestrians, so they're going to come out of this roundabout. They've got 20 feet, and they're going to see me and stop, right? Hopefully. Yeah, yeah. So it takes a lot of trust in your fellow man. But, I'm not here to be anti-roundabout because I know they have benefits, reduce crash severity and all that. But from a visually impaired standpoint, there are challenges. And they do, many of the people I've talked to, they always like to invite engineers out there who think roundabouts are a good idea. And invite them, just come cross with me. You'll be blindfolded. You'll go with me. We'll cross at the same time. See how you feel. I don't think they've been taken up on it yet. So, again, just another consideration. There's pros and cons to everything, but we could probably do more enhancements to help that situation. And there are design criteria that are already into our roundabout standards that are helping that situation, but obviously there's always trade-offs. So we'll get into some of the project design specifics, talk about the levels of ADA design and some of our checklists. And so before I talked about, you want to have 3 points on any curb ramp. And that was, if you're doing like the full recon, that's as complicated as it gets. When you're doing retrofits, we have different levels of design based on the complexity. So the first level is very easy, slam dunk. You come up to an intersection like this, you got grass boulevards, your sidewalks are straight, everything's lined up. I do not need to design this out. This is easy. Any contractor or inspector worth their salt can take their standard plans and say, combined directional, build this. And it should work out great. There's no need to send surveys out here or anything like that. All you need to do is make sure your quantities are measured up and you put them into any kind of a tab. Normally, like you always would for a concrete tab, you got your removals, your bit patch, your walk, curb and gutter, domes. But this far right column is what a level 1 is. You're basically just picking the ramp type and saying build it. Fairly simple. And actually, I had a project that came in at 90% plans, and they weren't doing curb ramps. And I know we missed some because they were out there. We were supposed to be doing them. So the designer kind of said, well, it's way too late now because I need to get surveys, I got to design it, got to get reviews, and it's never going to happen. I need 2 months minimum for this to happen. So I said, no, we can do better than that. So I went out there myself, 3 intersections, measured up 12 curb ramps by myself, just tape measure, slopes, figure out construction limits. 2 hours, had the quantities handwritten down, sent it to him, put them in the tabs, it was done. So it doesn't always have to be an ordeal. And again, we don't have a lot of level 1s, to be honest, just because our intersections are more complex and our construction people are needy, maybe. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. But if you've got a construction person worth their salt, they can do a lot of these designs in the field. And some of you folks, hopefully, can see both ends of that and see that, yeah, it's sometimes easier just to build this in the field versus always having everything designed out for us. Because, yeah, we need to be doing more level 1 designs. Because there are trickier areas that I'm going to get to. But again, actually showing, because our right-of-way folks say, well, we need a plan sheet to show where your right-of-way is, your TEs and everything. So I'm saying, well, no, not really. You can actually do this in a tabular format if you want. And this is just a way of me of proving you didn't have to do a plan sheet. But this is actually how construction limits are done for curb ramps as well. We're not cutting cross sections on curb ramps. We're just finding where those removal limits are. Maybe say distance A, 15 feet back. Distance B, maybe 5 foot off in a regular area. If it's a steep cut area, it might be 10 or 15 feet. But you're doing these approximations for easements. You're, like I said, you're not doing cross sections. And some right-of-way folks want that. It's overkill. It's impractical. It doesn't need to happen. It shouldn't happen. Again, we can kind of tell what these footprints are for sidewalk construction. Level 2 designs are ones that are getting more easy. Like this is where it starts to say to spend your time, get your surveys, design these out because they're harder. And it's unfair to expect construction to figure these out or contractors. So you've got XY control points, 20 scale sheets, maybe 30 if it all has to fit on one sheet for the intersection. I always use the ADA standard legend. And like we talked about, signals are level 2. This is the full legend. It's on our website. Always use this. This is we've got it to work with our pay items and our provisions. So it's a package. So again, anything you've got on the intersection, in-place signal pole or proposed, push buttons, pedestals, cabinets, curb heights, truncated domes, concrete curb and gutter, 3 lines, back a curb, face a curb, gutter, get it consistent, bituminous patch, landings, SF, drainage, transition. Whichever of these you've got in your plans, use them. Incorporate that, put it in your projects, on your plan sheets. Here's examples of level 2s. This one might be nitpicking because it's actually a little bit easy, but the only reason it's level 2 because that depressed corner is wider than the incoming sidewalk. So it's hard to describe that in the tab, so it maybe helps to draw that out. But again, this is always a level 2. That's the signalized quadrant we looked at this morning. Have the XY control points. Level 3, this is where you want to put a lot of time. Complicated designs that are vertically constrained, such as doorways, steps, alcoves, tie-ins. Existing slopes, 3% or greater. So if you're at that steep slope, we're talking about tabling it. You want XYZs on that flow line. Significant horizontal or vertical curb changes, put that information in the plan. XYZs needed for that stuff. 1 XYZ per landing, 1 XYZ per vertical constraint. Designer intent, that's what we're talking about. Like Tim talked about, raise the curb line 4 inches. Yep, put that in the plan. Or, match into this doorway. Put that in the plan. Numbers don't tell the whole stories. A few words certainly help that. And steep topography in areas that are steep, we want to design those out with XYZs. Here's an example of a typical level 3. We've got a doorway step to tie into. So we've got more information in there. We show the step on the plan. Oops, didn't mean to do that. We show the step on the plan. Oh, this thing's fun. It shows the step. There's got a coordinate for it. There's also language that says match landing to bottom of existing step, so it ties into what that elevation is. So it's clear what you're talking about. The designer intent is there so the field folks know. And there's information there for the curb line as you bump out, large landing. So overall, a good design, but spend more time on corners like this because elevations matter. You got to tie in from curb to tie in. Those other ones we talked about, that was that S slope or F slope. Contractor can just round up 10 feet in those areas. It's not the end of the world. We should get our quantities right, but they'll still figure it out. This, you're tied in everywhere. So you got to get it right. There's no rounding up another panel here. You're just going to miss if the elevations are off. So pork chops are level 3 designs as well, because again, you're constrained at all 3 flow lines. Right here, there's no rounding up, and often there's a lot of super elevation here. So you got to know what you're starting at, where you're ending. Sometimes this is negative to landing to positive, but yeah, you're dropping maybe a good distance through this. These free rights are often lower than the main lines. Here's one with steep topography. This is Duluth, chasing it uphill. You're never going to get that. It's not going to happen. But we were able to make this contour, the parallel route, accessible. We had to use a diagonal to get it to happen, though, because there's a lot of grade coming around this corner. So we did some design comps on this one alternate. We also looked at other alternates to make sure it was feasible. Diagonal was the best result. And again, we had gutter out, cross slope out. It was a steep diagonal. This whole area, this par along our highway is compliant. This one is not. We had to have a 13% cross slope uphill. And that sounds really bad and it's not good. But the existing condition was 11.5%. So we were never going to fix that. But we didn't want to make it appreciably worse. So usually 1% or 2% we're feeling pretty good about. Again, they're not really even ADA. It's just for all users. You don't want to just turn it into a non-usable system. So we balanced those efforts out. And that was the portion that we put into the plan. Everything else met standards, documented that 13% contractor, that's what you're supposed to do. That's all, you're not going to get much better than that. So we're not expecting compliance for that component, but everything else needs to be. So again, this is what we would zip into our files for our project documentation. So we have levels for sidewalks as well. And this sidewalk is easy. Grass on both sides. Don't waste your time designing it. Any contractor could build this correct night and day. Just put the quantities in there, tell them where you want to start, where you want to stop. They can get it done. So no need to put time into that. Level 2, you start wanting to show a plan sheet for this because, again, we're starting to say the location matters. We're doing an offset taper here. You want to show that in the plan. It's a lot more helpful for the field folk. And usually that on a 20 to 50 scale plan sheet. And again, here's your level 3s. We've talked a lot about this one. It's sidewalk, but it's a sure different sidewalk than that grass boulevard one. Much more complex, much more information on this type of system. So that's where we've got doorways and tie-ins. We're using sidewalk profiles with the broken boulevard, curb and gutter profiles, like Tim mentioned, XYZ and designer intent per vertical constraint, 20 to 30 scale. We also want to label the paved boulevard slopes greater than 5%, so we know what we're dealing with, so the contractor knows what they're dealing with. You know, we might figure out a scope way to make it improved, or just so the contractor knows, hey, this is what we're expected. I don't want to see this 8.5% out here type thing. Couple examples of this information. We've got landings by this doorway. We've got a 6-foot walk, 4-foot boulevard, landing into a doorway. The term says match sidewalk flush with doorway threshold, so I understand that. The elevations are up top on a profile for that doorway, and it shows the whole sidewalk profile, and actually shows the curb profile as well, I believe. So a lot of good information here, a good way to present it. This one, similar, a little different format, but it shows landings. It's got the elevations up there for the doorways. Again, these landings are hatched, which is good, but it talks about, you know, match in place 4-inch step height. So that makes me wonder, is that like matching the top of the 4-inch step or the bottom of the 4-inch step? It can make a big difference based on all these things we talked about. So again, what this term describes, make sure it's clear. So maybe a couple extra words might help, like match top of in place 4-inch step height, or even maybe just send it to the guy next to you in your cube and say, hey, what do you think I'm trying to say here? To get that neutral view of it. So make sure it's being clear what the intent is. So we have some checklists that we use on MnDOT projects, and these are for quality control, so the designers are including the right information, but also helps us as reviewers to make sure we've got enough information to give a good review. So if we look at a review without elevations, for example, we can kind of say, yeah, in a flat world, I'd do this, this, and this. Turns out elevations are a lot different than a flat world. Our recommendations will change, and you get this ever-ending circle of, okay, we're nailing this down. So you need enough information to get a good review. So that's what we're requiring in level checklist number 1. We do these between 30 and 60% plans whenever the information is ready. So we have project header up top. We also have survey accuracy. And this is a MnDOT requirement as well, that it be within a 1/10 horizontal and 5/100 vertical. So we're not saying what you need to do to survey that, but that's just the results you need to achieve. Quite often it's a total station, shooting it with a gun. We also use mobile and static LiDAR. Generally GPS has not been giving us this kind of accuracy. So again, know what you're doing before you even start your design as you're doing your survey request. So we'll talk about what information to include on a plan, and it's different based on the different levels. Like level 1 isn't even a plan sheet, so there's gonna be a lot less criteria here. Level 2s and level 3s are plan sheets, so you're gonna need more of this. For example, we just talked about all the things we talked about. Standard legend, yep, 2 or 3, I gotta do it. Show MnDOT right away, yes, but also show the local side street right away to know what's the limitation of the curb ramp that way. Show the surface utilities, yep, 20 to 30 scale, fit on one intersection, good. Where's your crosswalks? Pick your curb ramps. Flow lines between 2 and 3% can just do a note. Construction can figure that out. Flow lines greater than 3%, do that XYZ. Show your crosswalks, do your pole mount adapters and your pedestal adapters, designer intent, specify your non-compliant components, directional curbs done right, get your construction limits right. For sidewalks, show your tabs, your typical sections, your profiles, your doorway tie-ins, designer intent, driveway table, important. Surface utilities, 20 to 50 scale for the block, 20 to 30 scale for downtown. All the stuff we just talked about, that's what this is on these checklists. We went through all this, is just a repeat. Make sure that information is included in your plan if it's on MnDOT right away. So then we have checklist number 2. It's a lot simpler. It's more of the overall plan, between 60 and 90% usually. Make sure you got your pay items right, your domes are tabbed correctly, typical sections are right, get your reinforcement for your separate landing pours and your ADA special provisions. Got your standard plates, your striping, your XYZs for your push buttons, again for your curb and gutter as you needed. Landscape details, that's important, that's what we're talking about. Make sure those meet requirements and those are submitted in for review, along with your calcs and your sidewalk profiles, your curb and gutter profiles. So then we're ready to turn the plan in, submitting the project down to 6th floor. We've got an ADA design memo. Again, the same header up here, survey information like we talked about. We also have date of survey. The reason we want to do that is because we just want to see like how accurate was your survey, because a lot of designers will, hey, I got to start designing a job in March, so I'll do a survey request in January. Bad deal. You get nothing, you're expecting flow lines, you're getting nothing but top of ice if you're lucky. Again, you want surface utilities, they're underneath this much snow. Again, it's going to be a tough design, so we're kind of just tracking that as well. In the springtime too, you maybe don't want to send the surveyors out there when there's all kinds of frost in the ground. Things shift. So think about how that's all going to work into your project as it gets developed. This page is actually fairly simple. This is all on SharePoint, by the way. You just submit this. It's real simple. All we're saying is, list what the non-compliant features are, such as ramp slope, landing slope, or PARs less than 4 feet. And it's very, very interesting. Very many of our designs say 0, 0, 0, 0, everything's going to work. Construction also does compliance, and they're not all zeros. So again, we want to make sure our plans are accurate, conveying the right thing. I mean, sometimes designers, they hope it works maybe, I don't know. But the real proof is, between design and construction, you want to use this as lessons learned too to improve your process if needed. The last page is a zip file you can put all in here for all your documentation, and you submit it into SharePoint. So we've got pay items here, and we'll take a little break after this one, a short one. But we started off about 5, 6 years ago doing curb ramps, and if you do traditional pay items, you'd need about these 17 or so on your left to do all this. We boiled it down into 7 pay items to do curb ramps. We combined a lot of things, such as the walk included the gravel and the grading underneath, or site restoration, which is a really good one, included the seeding or sodding, the fertilizer, the mulch, the top soil grading, all into one. So we condensed a lot of pay items, less bean counting, more attention in actually getting the correct product. Because a lot of this work is based on hours of, of skid steer versus cubic yards of dirt, even from a contractor standpoint. So now that we added sidewalks, though, there was some complications because we're doing traditional pay items underneath our sidewalks and driveways. So at our curb ramps, for example, we were paying for the concrete walk, the gravel being incidental, but we're paying for the gravel underneath the sidewalks. Hard to tell for construction, well, what's incidental, what do you paid for? So actually we backed out the incidental gravel underneath the curb ramp. So now we're paying for it as compacted volume, 3 inches underneath the curb, the ramp, the walk, and the 6 or 8 inch driveway. So just paying for it. We recommend that not be a planned quantity so construction can use as they see fit. But also site restoration was confusing. It worked great, 1 each per corner. But where does the each end and the square footage start for sidewalk? So we kept the each for curb ramps only. When you're doing curb ramps and sidewalks, use square foot for all of it. Our linear patch used to be linear, the length of the curb by 2 feet, but now we have variable width patching, so it's square foot. So we should be able to figure that out. Yeah, so there's some pay item changes, and talked about that. And so we are using traditional pay items underneath the sidewalk. But if you're just removing and replacing the walk, like 5 foot walk, taking it out, putting back 5 foot, I wouldn't do any grading, obviously. If you're widening the walk, you might want to pay for that widening, or if you're changing the location, or if you're putting in a new alignment, just pay normally. Also, if you are lowering the profile, you should pay them for the cut, or if you're filling in. But just, you be fair, but don't knock yourself out, because then these quantities are small. We just want to make sure we're being fair to contractors. So, yes, this might be a good spot, and we're going to take a short break. So again, I encourage you to fill out all your evals if you haven't been doing that. Again, the sign-in sheet before you leave. So that was all the project stuff and the design requirements. So Joe Zilka in my office does a lot with that, so he appreciates making sure you're being attentive to all that. Now we're getting back to some of the stuff that I like to work on, some of the real nuts and bolts of making things happen. So here's a curb ramp where I like to talk about how the alignment comes in. So again, the alignment can make or break it, just like the profile, you know, it all matters. But here's one where we came back. This is a challenging corner. We didn't have right of way, so we did this on a standalone project later on. So we're going to get this one right. We're going to do the best we can on this because it's important and all that. So we came back. Obviously, you can see the curb ramp has a shift in it of a couple feet. In hindsight, you know, we do a lot of this Monday morning quarterbacking, but ideally, we would design it more for the sidewalk that's coming in. Just has a lot more intuitive, a lot more flow. That didn't happen. I'll just kind of show you from the other side some of the shortcomings of this. If you're progressing down this sidewalk and you just go straight, you know, if you're in a chair, obviously you're probably taking a digger. Visually impaired, kind of an ankle breaker, not good deal. Also, able-bodied, if you're not paying attention, same type of thing, checking your iPhone, whatever. Again, can lead to problems, but even not too intuitive for maintenance as well. One thing I do like to kind of mention here, like we're doing this 2-foot shift over a 5-foot landing. So if you're in a wheelchair, technically what you have to do this, you know, if you're able-bodied, you just say, oh, no big deal, I'm just going to sidestep and I'll make it. But really, when you're in a wheelchair, you actually got to make a conscious stop, turn, go. So it's like, all right, why did I have to do all that? I mean, that's a little bit of work, actually, and there's those other reasons we talked about. But if that curb ramp would have been over here, none of that would have been an issue. And actually, you can see where the striping used to be. That's where the curb ramp was. So again, we're engineers, technicians, whatever. You know, we turn a plan in, and we want to get this crosswalk squared up with the world, because that's what is the most important thing, right? So again, but putting this shift over 40 foot of roadway probably would have been much better than putting over 5 foot of landing. Again, had a lot more flow to it. And actually, we get grilled for this pretty good, because when, you know, we're lucky because we get to see how this works from the design process. We're out here building them in the field, and we see the final product. We hear comments from people, so we get a lot of input. So designers aren't always that lucky. But also, they don't understand when we when we make a recommendation, hey, why don't you just shift this curb ramp up 2 feet? Quite often, the designers are going to say, all right, who do you think you are? This is compliant. It's good enough. What makes your decision better than my decision or your opinion? And so again, we've got that luxury of hindsight and seeing the whole thing. And you can see where even that 2-foot shift can make a big difference in how that sidewalk system gets used for long term. So here's one where we've got 2 separate ramps in again. And again, it's compliant. And actually we do, you know, we allow half a ramp offset, half a ramp width offset. Because we got a little 4-foot par there, 6-foot wide ramp. But just looking at this, if we'd have put that white line sidewalk taper on there, would have been much more, you know, lead pedestrians over there. You wouldn't have that trip hazard, just much more common sense type usability. And again, we probably already had right of way here, TE, we were grading back there. And so a little 10 square foot of permanent right of way could have really made this design much better in the end product. Here is one. This was done quite a few years ago, and we were always saying that, you know, 2 ramps is better because visually impaired user can get that distinction between crosswalks and everything. But here, this definitely did not work out. Call this the square peg in the round hole, because we've got a 5-foot sidewalk coming in here, this big fill area, this hill behind us, and the curb line wasn't changing. So again, for people walking along straight in this direction of travel, you've got this curb bump in the middle that can be a trip hazard. Not good for bikes. Skateboarders probably like it. Wheelchairs don't. That's that stop and start I was talking about. Maintenance doesn't. They don't know where any of this stuff is. So again, 10 times out of 10, if you're stuck with this kind of geometry with that 5-foot sidewalk, this is a depressed corner. If you want something different than that, you might have to do something with the curb line, or you might have to do something with that hill, and we can talk different options. But again, there's certain ramps that only fit in certain areas, and then you got to, if you want something different, you got to think bigger to make sure you can make that happen successfully. Here's one where we talk about maintenance. And you can see where the maintenance guy thinks where the ramp should be. This is actually where the curb ramp is. That's the domes there. So again, that's his vote, and his vote matters because that's what actually people are using. So again, inaccessible for a lot of the winter. And again, this might have been done for grade reasons, but you still want to make it cognizant of how they're going to be operating long term. Here's one. Tim was mentioning this. This is not Minnesota. It's just a good picture. Obviously, the roller coaster type effect. You know, 0.6, 0.6, 0.4 would have been better. 4 to 2 would even been better. But I actually try to do something different altogether than this. The biggest thing we want to talk about, though, is, you know, like we've been talking about maintaining that rather consistent alignment or just gradual changes to the alignment. Same thing with the profile. You want to keep that as consistent as you can. This up and down is a lot of work. And you know, actually when it comes down to, if you can't get either one, what we find is that blend, halfway of each, like a halfway shift and a halfway dip, is actually pretty good. It's pretty gradual, and it works well for chairs and multiple users. And just you don't notice the effects in any one location too much, too greatly. Here we'll talk about bituminous trails, or trails in general, but this one's bit. ADA does apply to trails. You need to have that 2% max cross slope the entire width. That is also through driveways. So again, building trails at back of curbs with a lot of driveways is tough. You get that roller coaster thing I just talked about. So getting that boulevard in there for driveway aprons helps for trails. But we also talk about just how these get paved, that we are recommending to a minimum 2 1.5-inch lifts, just because if the contractors only do that 1.5-inch lift, usually that aggregate isn't a good paving platform. The edges get rounded. For sure the rollers get on it and they round off that 2%. So you lose it real quick. So even on a design build project, we had a contractor did a lump sum trail on his own dime, did 2 lifts because that's what he knew to make it work out right. So that was good reason for me. You know, they weren't just looking for more money. That's what they needed to make it happen. I haven't seen that yet. No. Sure. Yeah, that would be a good deal. Paving platform. Yep. Good. So again, that upper picture shows where it gets rounded with the pavers. Happens all the time. Again, here is that we talk about trail profiles. You know, should not exceed 5% according to ADA standards. Our bike manual does allow it to exceed for certain portions, greater than 5%. But that doesn't work for ADA unless you actually want to start using that ramp criteria, 30 inches vertical rise, landing, 30 inches vertical rise, landing, and you put handrails on both sides. So either keep your trails less than 5% or start building this staircase with double rails on your trails. You know, but I would think we'd want to keep it less than 5 for that more usable product for bikers and everything. But the ADA criteria does apply to trails. Here is one, brand new reconstruct, where we had a new DDI that went in and brand new utilities. So, but this utility went in there first. That elevation was picked, that location was picked. Obviously it's sticking up. We don't have our maintenance access route anymore. It's actually in the 2-foot clear zone. If it had been flush, that would obviously been better. A tire can hit this, but even a pedal can hit this. This is a bad deal. So want to be cognizant of that, how these utilities go in on reconstructs. Again here, brand new trail, concrete trail, and these utilities weren't identified. So construction said, fine, I can fix it, just go around. So we can get creative. Not the best solution in my estimation, but so again, this was the fiber optic vault on the right side. It was actually, that's why we went around that first hole. This is also 6 inches deep, so it's kind of a little trip hazard hole. But actually right down further this way, there's one that's a foot deep dropping in. So don't go off the side of this trail, because besides the fact that you're going around these things, they're down in the ground, you know, 6 inches to a foot. So again, get this into your designs, because construction won't always help you out. But they should be asking questions, and there needs to be definitely more coordination with utility owners. Talk about hydraulics a little bit. This was pre-2010. This is before I got here. There was an attempt at some kind of slip thing over here. But again, obviously the catch basin's in the way. So that was their attempt. We're coming back in 2011 on a MnDOT project. We're saying, yep, we're going to make this compliant. So, but there's still those same 2 catch basins in line with the path of travel. So that's where everyone's still going to want to walk. That's where probably a lot of you guys are. There's probably going to be a goat path there. That's where the bikers want to go and all that. But we're building this curb ramp over here, for accessibility. Left, right, right, left. Again, not a lot of continuity, doesn't make a lot of sense. But we were trying to avoid those catch basins. So now we're basically saying if those catch basins are in the way, part of the cost of doing business, move them out of the way. And we're doing this, trying to be selective how we do this. We're actually turning that existing structure into an ADA safe grate, 1/2 inch opening or less. And so you can wheel over that totally fine. And we're adding on a lead pipe 10, 15 feet away, shallow depth structure. So you can have that upstream hopefully and take the capacity, extra capacity, because that new grate reduces capacity about 50%. So when you add that helper structure, you've actually kept your sidewalk straight, but you actually have a 1.5% increase in hydraulic capacity. So again, here's a picture that shows that. There's our grate with a 1/2 inch opening. Again, leave it in the way and move the helper upstream. Another picture of it from the side view. What we also like to talk about here, that's kind of our threshold. If the catch basin's in the middle of the ramp or even a foot to either side, if you're building new structures, get these things 10 feet out of the way. So there's this threshold to move old ones. It's pretty tight. New ones, 10 feet away plus, upstream if possible. And just get them out of the equation. Here is a ADA safe grate detail that we have. And we've been including this on plans. It's actually in for our design advisory committee, so it'll be a standard plate for MnDOT structures. So that's good. It's been a long time coming. But also, I know many locals have different size structures. These are made in many different sizes by suppliers with the 1/2 inch maximum openings. I'd like to talk about this one. This one probably should have been an ADA safe grate too. We say if it's within a foot, generally we should. This one's in a sump. It's kind of an ankle breaker, so not a good deal there. So we don't want to do that. Even bikes could take this flare and come through here and still get in those vane grates. But also we like to talk about if there would have been a curb box here, we would always remove it if it's in your curb taper because it can't be there because it's got to meet those slopes. So we're removing a lot of curb boxes in those situations. And actually MnDOT is saying if it's an on-grade inlet, we never even install curb box inlets anymore. They don't take water in, it all just passes by. The only time we use curb inlets are at sag points, at low points. So we keep them there because our grates will clog and that'll be the overflow. So, if you're at a low point removing a curb box, you may want to add a helper structure. But these are our recommendations. Obviously, run it all by your hydraulic folks for drainage. And then there are ADA safe tree grates as well with those 1/2 inch or less openings. So I just wanted to let you know that. And they have pedestrian safe trenches and whatnot. So there's a lot of material that is pedestrian safe.
Real quick about the tree grate, like downtown, like Minneapolis, with the pine trees, so they have a narrow car area. Can the tree grates be part of that 4-foot car?
Yeah, they can as long as they're flush and you don't need a grade break there. They can be. It's really hard to keep them flush long term. Things settle. I wouldn't recommend it. I'd go with more of an elongated tree grate instead of the square ones. They make rectangular ones and try to keep it out of the par. But technically it could as long as you maintain it. But it turns into a trip hazard a lot. So we got a few example projects to wrap up with. We'll talk about Bayport on the east side of the metro on the St. Croix. We have one intersection here, very challenging. This is a mill and overlay project. The left side is the city hall. We have an elementary school over here. Both are up on a hill, fairly steep. This side is going to be easy, this near side intersection. Here's the school area. Again, steep boulevard. There's the first flight of stairs. There's 2 more flights beyond this, so it's very steep over there. 14% curb ramp, for example. As you can see, it's a diagonal on the far side. There's a pedestrian flasher, kind of leads you over here. There's not a curb ramp for this crossing. It's diagonal to over here to find your push button to, I don't know, don't go there because there's no curb ramp. So go back over here. So again, could use some improvements from accessibility standpoint. This is at an elementary school. And here's the other side. This side is really easy. It's fairly flat. This is where we're not going to spend much time over here. It's spend a lot more time on the more complicated side. Here's what we look at in our field walk reviews. We do field walks. We are out here dropping a lot of levels on things, seeing where the flow lines are, seeing where the grades are, seeing what's in the way, know where the drainage comes from, seeing what kind of curb ramps we can build. We're taking measurements. So we're documenting a lot of that information in the field. And I've always said, a third of the designer's time should be done in the field. That's really where you see it. You know, you see what, you get your plan, maybe you design something in the office, you go back out in the field, confirm that it's going to work. Field time is invaluable for designers, but I know it's kind of an uncomfortable environment, but it's very helpful. Gets you out of the cubes for sure. So yes, here's our recommendations. We'll see what they say. This is the City Hall corner. Again, this is an 8% slope going uphill from this sidewalk already, so I'm not going to chase that. I can't get any grade out of there. I can't improve it. It's already maxed out. So I'm going to use this as my construction tie-in. This is also 8% coming down here. So again, I got to put a landing in, so that hurts. But I've also got a 6-inch curb to make up. So if I can't change that top elevation, I got to change this bottom elevation. And all I can do is start doing stuff with the road. So that's what I'm going to start doing here. See where I can start, make that tie-in begin. Here's our field walk notes. We're going to leave the catch basin. We've got a 4% flow line. We're going to raise this curb line maybe 6 inches, we're talking here. See what we can happen here. The district also did not want bump outs here. So I'm going to kind of pull out all the stops here to do vertical changes because they didn't want, bump outs. I don't know, it's a school crossing. It seems like it'd be a good idea. But no bump outs, so we're doing everything vertical. So 6 inches maybe in the flow line. I'm also talking about maybe blistering this whole intersection 2.5 inches on an overlay. Maybe not doing a mill, but just a overlay. And to raise it 2.5 inches, you can put a taper on this, a paving taper. So it's basically 1 inch vertical for every 15-foot horizontal. We'll get you a good paving taper. This is for your through lanes now. And so if I do 2.5 inches, I go back 40 feet each way, blister it up, and I raise the center line 2.5 inches. And I'm going to try to raise this flow line more than that in the shoulder area. Here's another corner. This is very easy. Combined directional, level 1, move on. And that's what our notes say. Combined directional, level 1, done talking about it. Don't even need to design it, figure out quantities, because we got more important things to do, like right here. Here's all those flights of stairs. Again, 14% ramp. I've got to make up 18 to 20 inches here in one corner. From that flow line to that bottom step, to make it meet standards, make it compliant, 20 inches, let's say, for conversation. It's a lot. So I got to start doing some drastic things here. First of all, I normally don't add steps because you don't want to change the accessibility. You've already got 3 flights of steps here. So I'm going to add 2 steps. I'm going to drop this down a foot, modify the railing, and I'm going to chase it out, the sidewalk out this way. I'm also going to chase it back this way, but I'm going to lower this landing a foot. So if, for example, to chase this out, this is a 3% slope. If I want it to be a 5% slope, I got to chase 50 feet back. If I want it to be an 8% slope, I got to chase 30 feet back, whatever works. But again, I'm lowering that a foot. So I still got, 8 inches to come out of this thing. So again, the drainage is coming around the corner here, and this is the low point. So I'm locked here, because actually the drainage is coming in from the other direction too. So I got to find something to do with that catch basin. And again, there's that 1% drainage coming in. So I'm going to try to move this catch basin out of here, because I want to raise this flow line. So again, if I move it this way, I can still pick up the water. So also what we noticed was this existing shoulder was an 8% roadway inslope. That's steep. Obviously it doesn't meet crosswalk standards, so it has to come up from an ADA standpoint. But also if I can get that drainage structure out of there, I can take that 8% to a 2%. So 6% difference over 8 feet is 48 hundredths. So I got 6 inches right there. So I might reconstruct this shoulder as I move that catch basin out of the way, lift that flow line 6 inches. So I'm almost there, but that's where that last 2.5 inch blister was. I'm going to pave the main lines 2.5 inches higher. So I can raise this road, say 8.5 inches. I can lower the landing a foot, and there we go. So I mean, if you really want it to happen, you can do it. And again, bump outs might have made that easier. And parts of this might turn into a reconstruct, maybe. And that's okay, if that's what it is. And even, like I talked about this 40-foot taper, generally I'd have to move this catch basin back maybe 40 feet to make that happen too, because that would be the start of that taper. But all that's doable. It's probably 10 grand to structures. But again, this is the just primary destinations. The elementary school, city hall. Don't want to leave this big barrier in the middle of your community. So sometimes it's going to take more work. So this is about as tricky as it gets. We pulled out all the stops on this one. Again, this corner is going to be fairly easy, but it's a level 2 because of the flasher. You can see where we've got it marked up as what we would recommend, and make sure the button's accessible. And again, you can read the summary here, but we basically pulled out all the stops, and we'll be building this job a year from this summer. We'd like to talk about this project as well. This is a community, small community, where we were doing a mill and overlay, and this was again 3 years ago, so we had to do curb ramps. So that's what we're going to do. So we went through the design process. It's a steep area. You can see it's a uphill going down to a lake, so the whole road's got a pretty good cross slope to it, the lay of the land. And so we went through the design process, and the designer was always, he wasn't sure what the numbers were doing. I wasn't confident it was going to work. The city was saying they didn't want bump outs, so we were trying to get them what they wanted. 90% plans come in. We've got like 20% ramps, 2-0, so not good. So I go down there and talk with the city council and kind of explain to them the needs and saying, yeah, this is really going to work at all, and convince them to do bump outs. They didn't want them, just maintenance, all the other things, and I don't blame them. But after they understood it, they accepted it. And so we bumped out 4 intersections in their downtown area. So that is one of them. That's the product we had. It was good. There was definitely accessibility improvements with it. And but it was a curb ramp only job, so we weren't doing sidewalks. And actually you can see where our curb ramp removal limits ended right here. Happens to be in front of the mayor's business, so we could have helped ourselves out. Just move that curb construction limits up. Because we had all this settled sidewalk, and just you can see we had some raveled joints settling. Overall tough area. And I guess when in doubt, as long as you paint it yellow and throw some carpet over it, it's no longer a trip hazard. So the sidewalks were tough, there's no doubt. But we weren't doing sidewalks in 2015. Curb ramps only, right? That's all the Fed said. Check the box, move on. So I also should have mentioned when we were down there marking out the curb ramps, it turned out we were down to the gravel. The scope of the project changed, and we removed all the pavement in this corridor. And so, yeah, so we're marking our bump outs. We're going to make it happen. Pave it all back, do our bump outs, stripe the road. Next year, the city calls and says, yeah, our sidewalks are in bad shape. Got trip hazards everywhere, and we want to fix them. I kind of, oh, crap. Because I was wheeling around those sidewalks. I mean, I knew they sucked for trip hazards, but also the cross slopes were brutal. So we did an inventory after the job was done, looking at sidewalks. This is 3 blocks of inventory. The blue is non-compliant. The circled red ones are over 4%. Those where I'm pulling backwards to get down the road. And when you're over 4%, you're going to get extremely brutal boulevards to make this happen. So there's not a good solution here. We've just paved the roads. We're done with the project. I mean, what are we going to do? You got to raise the curb line if you want to fix the cross slopes. So the next year, you rip out all the curb, come in with a paver again, heat it up, and let's go. Do you rip out the curb and do a road diet and move the drainage structures while you're at it and patch into them? No. I mean, none of these are good options. So we came down to it where, okay, the city is just going to replace their sidewalks based on condition because there are trip hazards. We're not going to change any of the geometry, so we're good. So now the project is done. But let's look back on this. We told them they needed bump outs because of these extreme grades. So the city had accepted the bump outs that they didn't want, that we said they had to have. They actually ended up replacing all of the sidewalk in this area, but didn't change any of the cross slope like MnDOT would have wanted from an accessibility standpoint. So neither side really got what we wanted. Obviously, if we'd looked at this more holistically and said, if we'd have took out those 3 blocks of curb, it would have cost us about 60 grand. Remove and replace, because we're already doing the corners, so it's just a linear section, just going to leave the catch basins where they were. raised the whole thing up with this 60 grand a new curb. We were down to the gravel, remember, on the paving? So we were already there. 60 grand a curb, fixed the roadway, the sidewalk cross slopes. And as we raise it, probably wouldn't even have to do bump outs or smaller bump outs. So again, so we saved 60 grand and we spent it all on our curb ramps and our new sidewalk. Nobody got what they wanted. And so was that really saved 60 grand? And the whole deal is, it's gonna be like this for another 15 years. And when we come back in 15 years, it's the exact same fix. It's going in there, raising the curb that we saved the first time, redoing the sidewalks to correct the cross slope, and probably getting rid of their bump outs at that time. So if we're taking this piecemeal type approach, it can really have some detrimental end results. So just curb ramps aren't always enough. You got to think about how this works as a system and what are your goals to achieve. So we're putting that into practice. And again, this was an area, I'll just show this crosswalk. That's the cross slopes we're talking in front of this business. 9.5%. And you know, this one's underneath an awning, so it's not too bad, but there's others. People are walking out here, slipping on the ice. Elderly people are slipping. I mean, one of the business owners talks about his wife's a runner. She won't run on these sidewalks. She runs in the street. What are these sidewalks for? And I think we got to think about that. So again, missed opportunity. So we're calling that priority A sidewalk, or sidewalk that you need to change the curb line, either raise it or move it to get to work. We're saying you have to do that on mill and overlays. So you don't want to miss that opportunity, because that's the time to patch it all in, make sure the drainage works, and it all can look like it all can work as a good roadway system. So that is required on our tech memo, and we need to do that to complete our transition plan, basically, because you know, if we don't do this, we're not going to get to our 20-year goal, and we don't want to leave these sidewalks here forever either. So Sleepy Eye, we're putting that into practice. We've got some of those similar type cross slopes in town. This is a existing concrete road. We're doing a 3-inch bituminous overlay, making it a BOC. And yeah, we're going to see what that happens. So we evaluated this area of sidewalk. Again, blue is non-compliant. The white lines are the areas where we think we got to move the curb to fix them because they're over 4%. So the whole north side of that block and just a portion of the south block. So actually the designer called me this summer. He'd been cranking away on this diligently and just doing a lot of stuff. And he called me and said, you know, I'm so frustrated. I can't get this to work. I'm done with this. So I let him vent because he needed to vent. And then the first question I asked was, well, are you moving any curb lines? Are you doing any bump outs? So, no. Project scope didn't allow that, so he didn't want that. So, well, stop what you're doing. You're not a magician. You know, it's just geometry here. Things are going to work or they're not going to work. And this is not going to work unless you're thinking differently. So again, project was behind schedule. Designer is pretty stressed out and whatnot. So we actually brought in Tim's unit, who was working under contract for us. We said, we'll handle these downtown blocks and see what we can do. So we went in there on these areas where the white lines were. We raised it 3 inches in those priority A areas to see what we had. This was our first crack at it, the first run. This is on the north side, where that 3-inch raise gave us the green is less than 5, yellow is between 5 and 8, and the red was greater than 8. So not what we wanted. We'd already bought the curb line change here by raising it 3 inches to match that overlay, but we said, well, we're still not getting it. What if we move this curb out 2 feet in addition to that? It actually worked okay on the south side with just the raise. The north side, we went out and up. So now we have a 7-foot par, 5-foot boulevard. That's your green cross slopes, less than 5%, between 5 and 8 over here. The south side is all similar to that. And that's the summary of the south side. Half a block, 2 half-block moves. Lift the gutter 3 inches. Got a 6-foot par, 4-foot boulevard. 7-foot par, 5-foot boulevard on the other side. So again, designing it for what the needs are. This project is getting built this summer. And hopefully it's going to have good results. There are costs involved with this. Again, we tamped it up just based on contractor bids. 42 grand of pavement, bars, concrete, you know, removals, extra walk. 34 grand of structures. There were 6 drainage structures there for a total of 76 grand. But that's kind of what we're talking about in the last case, you know. I mean, we were going to have that all those missed opportunities or to get the results we want. I mean, it does cost money, but this is this prime area of downtown Sleepy Eye that was going to be very deficient, and now we're going to work very well and meet our goals that we talked about earlier. So it's kind of the cost of doing business, one in hindsight and one hopefully what we learned. So this is the complicated project I talked about. This is back to Snelling Avenue, again 3 years ago. This is the BRT. We're moving a lot of curbs and doing the curb ramps as needed. So again, south of the fairgrounds, I welcome all you guys to view this project. It's had a road diet on it, 2-foot curb shifts in some areas for pedestrian lighting. And again, we're going to be looking at all the accessibility improvements. So some before and after. You can see there's a pretty depreciated corridor, skewed crosswalk, ramps through the median. But we're going to go in here and do a lot of improvements. And basically this turned into be a full sidewalk improvement. I'll tell you how we got there, but I just want you to look at these types of pictures and see what you can do on a preservation type project, mill and overlay. This, I will contend that if you were to drive this corridor, that you couldn't tell if this was a mill and overlay or a recon. The only way you could tell is because we left some of that median in there, that old concrete. But otherwise, it's a black, new mat, new sidewalk everywhere, a lot of new curb and gutter. And it looks like a recon from a pedestrian standpoint, and we got the same results as a recon. So again, keep that in mind. So side by side, before and after, you can see obviously, night and day type improvements between the two. And we'll look at this corner. We had a small little depressed corner, but that actually worked. But more importantly, we had these steep driveways. So all you could do is do a parallel type driveway, which you'd have to go start tying back maybe 8-10 feet into that parking lot, disrupting 2-3 parking spaces, putting a slope on all of them. But the city actually wanted to do some pedestrian scale lighting, so they wanted to move this curb line out to allow room for that lighting. That allowed us to put an apron in the new boulevard area, have our par with just a 2-foot tie-in to the right-of-way. So again, we looked inward so we wouldn't have those off right-of-way impacts, and a really good solution here within our existing right-of-way. Here was a very tricky corner. Again, landscaping all over. We had to tie into this doorway, 2 drainage structures right in the middle of where your sidewalk would come. We've got our old diagonal type ramp here. But yeah, this one was tough to get around, patches all over in the sidewalks. So afterwards, much improved. Those 2 structures, relocated them out of the way, allowed that curb ramp to come in there, directional curb ramps both ways. But actually, we've got 2 structures over there, a couple structures over there. So this is a high point. So I can start floating this. So we raised this curb line because we had to tie into those doorways. Again, we had the mill and overlay that allow us to do this. And also, there is, this is kind of the early scales of that compound radius, early days. We held tangents through the curb ramp, which was good, it maximized the ramp runs. But also there was this drainage structure in the way, so it's kind of out of a matter of necessity almost, that we kind of just put this straight line chamfer through there. But that's actually how trucks actually use this area. They turn from over here, right in front and into the lane. So it's kind of a crude compound radius, but just making it fit in what happened and to get the curb ramps to work within the existing infrastructure, because we couldn't go out there and start moving every structure. And that's one thing I will say about the drainage structures. Often we do not want to chase it back into these types of storm manholes, because that's real money, digging up all this. So when I start moving this structure, this one actually I think we did move, but often we'll just leave that structure in place and add leads on. So that's the shallow depth ones, $5,000 a pop, fairly economical. You start digging them back to the mains and digging a new trench for a new location, a lot more dollars and really unnecessary in most cases. Here is a signalized intersection, narrow sidewalks for street furniture. There was existing APS on this thing, obviously no curb ramp upgrades. APS doesn't meet standards either, but we're going to see what we can do here. There's a push button on the pedestal. We're going to move it over here. City didn't want extra clutter. $5,000, move a pedestal, kind of move on. Again, we've got 2 push buttons, fan ramp, wider sidewalk. We had V-curb here, which isn't ideal, but we weren't allowed to get right away because this was a 6-month project. We crashed this thing through. But really a very nice improvement here before and after at this APS intersection. Similar here. there was a narrow sidewalk with 2 diagonal ramps, 2 push buttons on 1 pole. There is APS here, but you know, you don't get a real warm fuzzy of where that's directing you across this busy highway. So it doesn't meet standards at all. And this is actually where Met Transit was putting a bus stop. So, I mean, they do things nice. There's no doubt. So nice BRT bus stop. Put the PAR behind it. We were able to get 2 separate push buttons in. Very nice improvement here. Here, that was 1 block south of University Avenue with the light rail. This is 1 block north. And again, tight area with this bus stop. We barely had a 4-foot PAR there. This driveway would have been very steep, tough to make out. It would have been a parallel likely, chasing it back. But again, so we saw the ADA needs here, but obviously we went beyond ADA because I said this is right near the LRT, high pedestrian volume. Made a lot of sense just to totally blow this thing out. So again, ADA started the driver of the needs, but then what is fully out there? You know, there's a lot more going on. So this was a good fix for this corridor. This intersection is actually one where the 2 kitty corners, what we talked about earlier, this is one of the BRT bump outs from this earlier session. BRT is going up there. Again, there's less than a 4-foot PAR between that light pole and the V curb. Again, we can't get right away, so it's got to stay there. So what are you going to do? Move the pole. 15 grand, move it out of the way. See what happens? There you go. Maintenance access route, no problem. Directional PARs, directional curb, APS all works. Didn't get into right away. Again, this is all mill and overlay, this project. It's not a recon, what we're doing here. Here is one of those postage stamp pork chops I talk about. You've got a 4-foot PAR going through here. You know, it's compliant, but you are not going to maintain this thing. It fills up with grit, dirt, garbage, trip hazards, snow and ice. It's going to be flush. But, so what can we do out here? First of all, I start looking at this area. You know, this is all right turn lane, and you know, what's this? This is nothing. This is ripe for the picking right here. I can make that pork chop a lot bigger. Also, there was a need for some channelization here, or just actually cleaning up the lanes. So the pork chop can get wider this way too. Just kind of make sure the vehicles are traveling where they're supposed to and traffic calming, whatever. But this is 30 miles an hour. So we've got 2-foot reaction to face a curb on both these. Much bigger pork chop. And these are kind of like bike width ramps in here because that's what they wanted. Huge improvement here. Actually, we did replace the signal, but we didn't need to. But again, what the geometry can certainly make or break your project. So again, want to be transparent on this. There are real costs. So if you look at the top line, we had an $8.5 million project. To do a full recon on these 20 blocks, for conversation, would have been about $20 million. But you know, that was never in the cards. You know, it's not a high priority road for Metro. You know, our freeways are pretty important. That's where we spend a lot of our money. So pavement wasn't driving this. Utilities weren't driving it. So really, there's no really need to do anything. We're just going to do our mill and overlays forever, well, for lack of a better word, you know, for a long time. But we had a ton of ADA and pedestrian needs out here, and we showed that you could do all that on a preservation project. And there was cost though, $2.4 million of flat work and gravel. So, but that would have been about what it would have been on a recon, maybe 10%, a little over. And if you think about it, we were already $600,000 into curb ramps. And just based on the ADA needs that I talked about, cross slope and condition, we were at 60%. So about $750,000. So, you know, 1.4 in ADA. The city decided to, well, let's throw the rest in here, do all the sidewalk, $600,000 worth of enhancements for the $2.4 million. And again, not saying it's not a lot of money, but it got us a very good product. And I do encourage all of you to drive this corridor, because we did these things we were talking about, these lifts of curb lines and shifts and whatnot. And so drive it, but I also encourage you to walk it, because it's a very good product. And so I think we got our pedestrian value out of this, in my estimation. And also, just to put it in kind of a context, we also did a price per block. So our project would have been $425,000 a block, or about $1 million a block on the recon. So if on a smaller scale type project for what you're thinking, that puts it in that different context. So here's the last example I'll talk about. This is a intersection coming, curb ramp coming off a bridge. And first just kind of lay out the who owns what. So we've got I-94 going below. So that's MnDOT. We've got County Road going over top. We've got a frontage road coming here that's a city. Plus there's an off-ramp from 94, so it's city-state combo on the frontage road. We've got a MnDOT bridge. We've got a city-operated and maintained signal system. All of it on MnDOT right-of-way. So I call these things orphans because nobody wants to own them. Nobody wants to do what needs to happen. They think it's always someone else's responsibility. And so quite often nothing happens. And if something happens, it's often very minimal. And I'll kind of walk you through what we did. And everything we did was fully compliant, or it met ADA. Because it says you can stay within the scope of your project, but whatever your scope of your project, and you can, if you have limitations beyond the scope, you can leave them. So we're going to go through and fix this thing piece by piece, which ADA will allow, but let's see what you guys think about it. So again, this is pre-2010. This is a very steep ramp. This is like 12+%. And actually, you know, it's kind of at the diagonals. You got to come down, kind of, you want to do a wheelie, but you got to hang a left to get through that diagonal, and you can't have your front wheels hit that, because if they do, you're going head over T-kittle out in the middle of the road. So it is treacherous, and a lot of users wouldn't use this. So we came in 2010, curb ramp only, concrete and detectable warnings, and said, yep, we're going to improve this. So we did, condition-wise. But obviously you still tied into that same bridge sidewalk, and you had to tie into the same flow line. So it's still 12%, but it is a definite improvement. So that was good. Now, in 2016, we had a bridge project where we're doing a bridge deck mill and overlay, and also the pedestrian folks wanted to widen the sidewalk because it was too narrow, so that was great. So we got to redo the curb ramp because we're widening everything. But also, now we've got a bridge scope project, so I can actually hammer down that bridge sidewalk. So I'm going from an 8-inch to a 4-inch sidewalk at the bridge, and now I'm tying into that. So I've taken 4 inches off the top, rebuilding the whole curb ramp again. You know, I'll do this piece by piece if I have to, and we'll hopefully get there. But it's still over 8%, and actually it's hard to see on here, but we do have some of that negative boulevard because we're down lower, so we got negative boulevard. And actually, we don't even really have a curb here. It's like a 1 or 2 inch curb, so it's not much of a detectable edge. So we're still struggling with a lot of things. And again, we're still too steep. So some of the answer is, we got to raise this flow line still. I've already taken the 4 inches off the top, but I need to get another 4 or 5 inches out of this curb line. Again, because it's too steep, but also there's not APS here yet, and there's not a landing if there would have been a button. So okay, we'll just keep waiting for the right project. We'll keep doing this piece by piece. And 2017, the county was going to do an overlay project. So actually, they were going to come here and do curb ramps early, and they wanted to remove this failing crosswalk. So they did that. But we actually said, yeah, you can't really fix this curb ramp unless you start going down the road here. And but they were going to pave this whole intersection here. And again, we told them not to improve the ramps because they really couldn't have with that scope of project, because we were coming in here in 2019 with an overlay, and that's where we're going to do some of this raise that we're talking about, get a super through this area. So, so we talked the county out of not doing skipping this intersection in 18, so we'll finally do it all in 19 together. The traffic folks actually got on board, and they said, oh yeah, by the way, we probably want to replace that signal, so that's good. So at least we're getting that done. So finally, 2019, we hope that that is going to be the deal, where it all happens and it all comes together. So, but what I like to challenge us, or just ask us, you know, if we don't have the money to do it right the first time, how do we have the money to do it wrong 2, 3, 4, or more times? I mean, tell me that's not politics, or where the pots of money come from, or who's at the table and who's not. It's not cost effective. And I don't know if we think we're fooling ourselves, are fooling the public. We're not. The public gets it. They see us out here every other year doing the same curb ramp. You know, they're not thinking that we're the brightest people in the room. And they're right. I mean, we are throwing away money here every time we do this. Right, 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 yeah, we do this over and over. But it's even worse on the pedestrian standpoint, like I said, because that's always the fringe of your work. You know, I got a bridge project, and yeah, I'll do as much of the curb ramp as I can. Or I got a signal project, and I'll just do as much of this as I need to. But if it never all comes together, we're always going to be reworking those fringe areas, which are the pedestrian facilities. So again, we can spend a lot of money, do a lot of stupid things, have a lot of traffic impacts, a lot of pedestrian impacts, and again, look stupid and be stupid. Or we can scope and program these things sensibly. So hopefully that might go into that conversation over how agencies get together on things, because this would be for sure a good one to get together among agencies. So a few slides. I won't go through much of these in detail. These are all in our tech memo. They're in your manual. We talk about doing the field walk, assessing right-of-way, making sure we've got the right budget. Things we assess on our field walk, you can read those. When we look at right-of-way, we're seeing that we often need extra right-of-way, such as at signals. There are obviously exceptions. We're not going to buy buildings or move huge retaining walls, or often we're not going to move, you know, those big expensive signs. But we want to make sure we're being reasonable with that. We want to make sure we're weighing our environmental risks, not buying into Superfund sites unnecessarily, for example. And also making sure our utility relocations make sense. Again, we'll do a lot of the leads of things, you know, if we're in the few thousands or even $10,000. If you start moving like big lines that are in the multiple tens of thousands, we're really going to look differently at that and try to find lower cost alternatives. But again, we still want to say, well, we do it for a car, should we do it for a sidewalk, kind of thing.
Utilities will argue with you too. They will drag their feet, anything to not have to relocate.
I think it's part of education. I just had a meeting with the utility company near 94, and actually we are moving 2 lines of poles, one on their dime, and again, one was going to be our dime. So I think I'm getting down to say, well, let's just move the worst half of the poles. So I mean, we're getting there. So it's that type of thing, and I think we're going to drop 80 grand into moving 1.5 blocks of utility poles that are right in the middle of the sidewalk, and they're going to move some others. So yeah, you got to sort through the details with utilities.
Ours was right in the middle of the ramp.
Yep. Yep. So again, there's a lot of design requirements, or design resources you can use. These are on our website. And this one, we just basically talk about construction limits. And then this is actually a good one to talk about. We talk about getting 6-foot boulevards is a good start. Obviously, 8 to 10 would be a better. Snow storage, tree planting, more separation, all that. Also, if you can only get a 4-foot boulevard, we'll talk about doing a 4-inch curb a lot of the times. Just because, you know, that'll get you an 8% driveway or an 8% curb ramp. You can be at full height. So again, versus going up to that full 6-inch height. And then we talk 8 foot, we want at sidewalks at back of curb should be 7-foot minimum. 8 foot at sidewalk, at curb ramps and driveways. And again, the 6-foot par with a 2/3 to 1/3 ratio. So I like to end it with this one. Since it must have been a city curb ramp project, it was someone else's trail. So we'll call this job security, if nothing else. So that is actually all I have today. Ooh, we're 10 minutes over. Sorry about that, guys. But yes, I appreciate you all sticking around. And take the...
Evaluations, if we can get those right here on the front table, I'd sure appreciate it.